I am Bella Hayden, 26 years old. On the morning I was supposed to drive to my first big client meeting, I opened the garage to find the space empty. My car, my silver Honda Civic that I had bought with years of freelance savings, was gone. Confused, I called my parents, and my father casually said over the phone, "Oh, we sold it last night. You don't need it anymore." My hands shook so violently that the coffee mug slipped from my grip and shattered on the driveway. The autumn air carried the faint smell of wet leaves and gasoline. A thin mist hovered over the neighborhood, and for a second, the world tilted as though I had stepped into someone else's life. The Civic wasn't just a car, it was the symbol of my independence. The way I proved to myself that I could stand on my own after years of being treated like an afterthought. Hearing that it had been sold without my consent felt like having the ground ripped out beneath me. Before I share how this betrayal unfolded, let me know where you are watching from and subscribe if you value standing up for yourself. Growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, my family lived in a modest 2-story house painted pale blue, though the paint always seemed to peel faster than my father could fix it. My parents weren't cruel, but their affection was unevenly distributed. My younger brother, Darren, always soaked up their attention, praised for his soccer trophies, his loud personality, his charm. I was the quiet one, the girl who spent evenings sketching designs on graph paper and saving every allowance dollar instead of asking for new clothes. Independence became my currency of worth. When I turned 22, I started freelancing in graphic design while juggling a part-time retail job. Every penny I earned was split between tuition, rent, and a slowly growing dream fund. I wanted something tangible to show for my work, something that was mine and untouchable. The Civic became that dream. It wasn't flashy, but when I signed the papers and held those keys in my hand for the first time, I felt like I had finally carved out a space in the world that no one else could control, or so I thought. That morning, standing in the driveway with glass shards around my feet, memories of every overlooked achievement came rushing back. The art competition I had won in high school that no one attended. The college acceptance letter I opened alone because my parents were at Darren's playoff game. The late nights building my portfolio while they told me I should get a real job. And now, even my hard-earned car had been stripped from me, turned into cash without a single conversation. I stormed back inside and dialed my father again, my chest tight with anger. "Why would you sell my car?" I demanded. His reply was calm, almost dismissive. "You're living at home again, Bella. You don't need it. Besides, Darren's tuition is due. We needed the money." The words sliced deeper than he could have imagined. Not only had they sold my car, but they had sold it to cover my brother's expenses. Again, Darren's needs eclipsed mine. I froze after hanging up. My reflection stared back at me from the microwave door, pale and furious. It wasn't about the car anymore. It was about being invisible in my own family. My independence had been converted into Darren's lifeline, without anyone asking me if I was willing to sacrifice it. The Civic represented my late nights, my resilience, and my freedom to move through the world on my own terms. Selling it behind my back was more than theft. It was betrayal dressed as practicality. Darren texted me later that morning. "Thanks for helping me out with tuition. You're a lifesaver." My stomach churned. He assumed I had agreed to this. He thought I had willingly surrendered the very thing I had worked for. I wanted to scream, to tell him that his life had been built on the bricks of my sacrifices. The quiet sister, the dependable daughter, the one they could always take from because I wouldn't cause a scene. But something inside me cracked that day. Maybe it was the way my father's tone dismissed me, or the assumption in Darren's text, or the silence of my mother who didn't even call to explain. For the first time, I decided I wasn't going to swallow it. That night at dinner, the kitchen smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary, my mother's attempt at a cozy family evening. But the air was thick with tension. I sat across from Darren, who was scrolling on his phone, while my parents exchanged glances that told me they were expecting gratitude. "So," my mother said carefully, "we thought you'd understand. Family helps family." "Family also respects family," I shot back, my voice steady though my hands trembled under the table. "You didn't just sell a car. You sold my independence. You sold the one thing I earned without anyone's help." Darren looked up, frowning. It's not a big deal, Bella. You can always get another one. The casual tone sent heat rising up my neck. Do you hear yourself? Do you have any idea how long I saved for that car? Do you know how many times I said no to going out? How many nights I stayed up working just to afford the down payment? He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. I thought you'd want to help me. I've been helping you my whole life, I snapped. And none of you have ever asked me if I wanted to. Silence fell. My father's jaw tightened, his fork clinking against his plate. My mother shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, the words they had buried me under for years were spilling out, undeniable. I excused myself before tears could fall, locking my bedroom door and sliding down against it. The Civic was gone, but something else had arrived. A spark I hadn't felt in years. Anger, yes, but also determination. They thought they could decide my life for me. They thought I would just accept it like I always had. But this time, they had underestimated me. That night, lying awake, I made a quiet promise to myself. This betrayal would not define me, but it would change me. I was done being the silent, overlooked daughter. If they wanted to strip me of my independence, I would build something even bigger, something no one could sell out from under me. They thought they had silenced me, but what they didn't know was that they had awakened me. Darren had always been the sun in our household, and I was expected to orbit quietly around his brightness. Growing up, our living room shelves were filled with his trophies. Soccer medals, certificates, glossy team photos, while my art projects, even the ones that won school competitions, ended up stacked in dusty boxes in the basement. My parents loved to brag about his goals, his championships, his potential. When it came to me, their praise was softer, almost reluctant, like they weren't sure my achievements really counted. One memory stuck out vividly. I was 16, standing on the high school auditorium stage as the principal announced the winners of the regional art contest. My sketch had taken first place, a meticulous pencil drawing of the Cleveland skyline at sunset. The crowd clapped, and for once I felt like I had a spotlight. Afterward, I found my parents in the audience, but they weren't clapping. My father was glancing at his watch, and my mother whispered, "We need to hurry. Darren's game starts in 30 minutes." They congratulated me briefly before rushing me out the door. That sketch still hangs in the school hallway, but in our home, it was like it never happened. Darren's golden child status was never questioned. When he got into trouble, sneaking out, skipping class, even getting caught drinking at a party, my parents defended him. Boys will be boys, they'd say. But when I missed curfew by 10 minutes after staying late at the library, I was grounded for a week. It wasn't that they didn't care about me, they just cared more about him. He was the investment, the one they thought would carry our family name into greatness. The imbalance didn't always make me angry. Sometimes it made me numb. I buried myself in work, saving money in envelopes I hid beneath my mattress. Every paycheck I earned at my part-time job folding clothes in a department store went into that stash. While Darren got a brand new pair of cleats every season, I patched my sneakers with glue and tape, thinking about the future I was building. Dollar by dollar. By the time I turned 24, I had enough saved to buy the Civic. I remember walking into the dealership, my hands trembling as I signed the papers. The salesman assumed my father was co-signing when he saw his name listed as my emergency contact. And the look on his face when I said, "No, this is all mine," still makes me smile. Driving that car home felt like victory. For once, I didn't need Darren. I didn't need my parents. I had earned something on my own. That's why the betrayal cut so deep. Selling the Civic wasn't just about taking my car. It was erasing years of sacrifice, dismissing my independence as something disposable. And the worst part? They did it to pay Darren's tuition. Again, I had been reduced to his stepping stone. The dinner confrontation the night they told me wasn't the end. In the days that followed, the house turned cold. My father avoided eye contact, my mother busied herself with chores, and Darren acted like nothing had happened. He drove around in his friend's car, laughed with his buddies, and came home bragging about his classes, as though my anger were just background noise. One evening, I overheard him on the phone in the kitchen. "Yeah, my sister helped out with tuition," he said casually. "She's always been good for stuff like that. Quiet, dependable. I froze in the hallway. Quiet, dependable. That was how he saw me. Not as someone with dreams, not as someone with agency, but as a background character in his story, a resource to be tapped when convenient. The next morning at breakfast, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "You think I helped with your tuition?" I asked, my voice sharp. Darren blinked at me, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Didn't you?" Dad said. "Dad lied." I cut him off. "They sold my car, Darren, my car. Do you even realize what that meant to me?" He frowned. "It's just a car." My chair screeched against the tile as I stood. "It wasn't just a car. It was every late night I spent working, every time I stayed in while you went out. It was mine, and they gave it away for you without even asking." For the first time, I saw guilt flicker across his face, but it was faint, quickly smothered by his usual arrogance. "I didn't know," he muttered. "But, it helped me. It's not like they wasted it." I stared at him, the anger simmering into something colder. "You always say that, don't you? As long as it helps you, it doesn't matter what anyone else loses." My mother entered then, carrying a laundry basket. She froze at the tension in the air but didn't intervene. That was her way. Smoothing things over silently, hoping problems would fade if ignored long enough. My father came in minutes later, grabbed his coffee, and when he noticed my glare, he sighed. "Bella, enough. We did what we had to do for this family. Darren's education benefits us all." "No," I said firmly. "It benefits him, and it costs me, every single time." The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Darren dropped his spoon into his bowl with a loud clatter, clearly annoyed. My father shook his head, muttering, "Ungrateful," under his breath. That word stuck to me like glue. Ungrateful. As if I should be thankful for being robbed. As if I owed them my silence and compliance. That night, I pulled the box from under my bed where I kept my old sketchbooks and design drafts. Flipping through them, I realized something important. I had always been building toward independence, toward a life outside their shadow. The Civic was gone, but the determination that had fueled me to buy it hadn't disappeared. If anything, the betrayal had sharpened it. I opened my laptop, scrolled through my saved freelance contracts, and began drafting emails to expand my client base. If they thought they could set me back by taking my car, they were wrong. I would work harder, save more, and rise higher than they could imagine. They had taught me one thing: never rely on them. From now on, I would build a life so secure that no one could take it from me again. That night, I whispered to myself a quiet vow. I will never let them treat me like background again. The days after the car betrayal felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Every word at home was sharp, every silence even sharper. My parents avoided me, pretending nothing had happened. Darren carried on like the world revolved around him, which in our house it always had, but for me, the cracks in our family foundation became impossible to ignore. I noticed how quickly they dismissed me, how easily they erased my sacrifices, and I realized this wasn't the first time. It was simply the worst time. When I was little, I used to wait by the window for them to come home from Darren's games. They'd burst through the door, glowing with pride, carrying snacks and souvenirs. I'd hold up my drawings, eager to show them later. "Bella," they'd say. Later never came. It was always his goals, his scores, his future that mattered. My own accomplishments faded in the background, barely acknowledged. But now, with my car gone, the truth screamed in my face. I was invisible to them. One evening, I walked past the living room and heard my parents talking. "She's overreacting," my father muttered. "She's always been sensitive." My mother sighed. "She'll get over it. She always does." Their words sliced into me like knives. Always sensitive, always expected to swallow the pain and move on. I clenched my fists, forcing back tears. This wasn't just about sensitivity. This was about respect, and I had none in their eyes. The next weekend, Darren strutted into the kitchen with a grin. "Guess what?" he said. "I aced my midterm. Professor said I have potential." Mom beamed. "That's wonderful, honey." Dad clapped him on the back. "That's my boy." I sat at the table, silent. None of them noticed me. Finally, I spoke. I just landed a new client, I said quietly. The room fell silent for half a second. Then Darren smirked. Is that, like real work or just your little side gigs? I stared at him, stunned. Side gigs? I pay my bills with this work, Darren. He shrugged. Relax. I didn't mean anything. Just saying it's not the same as a degree. My father nodded in agreement. Darren's education will open doors. Freelance work is temporary. I wanted to scream. How could they not see the value in what I was doing? Every invoice, every project, every sleepless night was building my career. But to them, it was nothing. Their blindness only made me more determined. That night, I stayed up late drafting a plan. I listed potential clients, outlined goals, and set deadlines. If they wouldn't recognize me, I would make myself undeniable. The next morning, I woke up early, drove Darren's old bike to the cafe, and worked for hours. Emails, contracts, designs. I poured myself into it all. Every keystroke was fuel for my fire. Still, resentment gnawed at me. Every time I thought of the Civic, my stomach twisted. One night, I confronted my mother. Why didn't you tell me before selling it? I asked. She avoided my eyes, folding laundry at the kitchen counter. We didn't think you'd mind. Didn't think I'd mind? I repeated, my voice shaking. It was my car, my savings. How could you just decide that? She sighed. Darren needed help. You're strong, Bella. You can manage without. Those words burned. Manage without. That was my role, the backup plan, the self-sufficient one, the one expected to carry the weight silently. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her I wasn't a machine, but instead, I walked away, my heart pounding. That night, I realized something. Their image of me would never change. To them, I would always be the dependable one who asked for nothing. They didn't see my sacrifices as sacrifices at all. They saw them as my duty. The cracks widened, and I began to distance myself. Meals were eaten in silence. Conversations became surface level. I poured everything into my work, creating a world where I mattered. But the bitterness lingered. At night, lying awake, I replayed the betrayal over and over. Their faces, their words, the empty driveway where my Civic once stood. It wasn't just loss. It was a reminder that I couldn't trust them. Trust was gone. One evening, Darren came into my room uninvited. Look, he said, leaning against the doorframe. I know you're mad, but you'll thank us one day. When I make it big, it'll help everyone. I laughed bitterly. Help everyone? Or help you? He frowned. You're so negative. Why can't you just support me? Because supporting you means destroying me, I shot back. For once, he had no reply. He left, slamming the door behind him. I sat on my bed, breathing hard. My chest tight, the cracks had become canyons, and I didn't know if we'd ever bridge them. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. And if they wouldn't see me, then I'd make them. On my terms, not theirs. The breaking point didn't arrive with a bang. It crept in quietly, like a slow leak filling a room until I was drowning. Every day, another jab, another dismissal, another reminder that I was invisible in my own home. Until finally, the dam broke. It was a Sunday afternoon when it happened. The house smelled of roast chicken, and sunlight spilled across the dining table. My parents sat across from me, chatting about Darren's upcoming interview at a consulting firm. He was nervous, but they reassured him like he was about to save the world. I sat silently. My plate barely touched. Bella, my mother said suddenly, can you take the bus this week? Darren needs the bike for his interviews. The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. The bike? I repeated, my voice sharp. Yes, my father said firmly. You'll manage. That word again, manage. As if my life existed only in terms of survival, never thriving. I stared at them, my pulse thundering in my ears. You sold my car, I said, my voice low. And now you want me to give up the last piece of independence I have? They exchanged a glance. It's temporary, my mother said softly. Darren needs support right now. And what about me? I demanded. Who supports me? The silence that followed was deafening. Darren smirked, shoving another bite of chicken in his mouth. You'll be fine. Izzy, you always are. Something inside me snapped. I slammed my hands on the table, the plates rattling. No, I won't be fine, I shouted. I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm not your afterthought. I'm not your damn servant! Their faces froze in shock. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice like that. The years of swallowed hurt came pouring out like a flood. You think I don't notice? That I've been invisible my whole life while you showered Darren with everything? The car was mine. My money, my work, and you stole it from me. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. My father's jaw tightened. Lower your voice, Bella. No, I yelled. For once, you're going to hear me. My chest heaved as words tumbled out faster than I could think. When I was little, you missed my art shows because of his games. You forgot my birthdays because of his tournaments. Every sacrifice I made, every achievement meant nothing to you. Nothing. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That's not true. Then why do I feel like a stranger in my own family? I shot back. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Darren leaned back in his chair, looking amused. You're so dramatic, he muttered. That single word made my blood boil. Dramatic? I spat. I built a career from nothing while you got everything handed to you, and I still get treated like I don't matter. Darren rolled his eyes. You're jealous. I laughed bitterly. Jealous? I don't want what you have. I want respect. And clearly that's too much to ask here. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done, I said coldly. My parents looked at me in shock. What do you mean, done? My father asked. I mean, I won't be treated like this anymore, I replied. I'll finish my contract with my clients, but after that, I'm leaving. Leaving? My mother whispered, her face pale. Yes, I said. I'll find my own place, my own life, one where I'm not the ghost in my own family story. My father shook his head. You're being ridiculous. Families argue, but they stay together. Families respect each other, I corrected, and you don't respect me. I turned to walk away, but my mother's voice stopped me. Bella, please, she said, her voice trembling. Don't do this. We can fix it. I turned back slowly. Then prove it, I said. Prove that you see me, that I matter as much as Darren. Otherwise, I'm gone. Their silence told me everything. I walked out of the dining room, my hands shaking, my heart pounding, in my room. I collapsed onto the bed, the weight of my outburst pressing down on me. But beneath the fear, beneath the guilt, there was something else, relief. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth. The breaking point had come, and I hadn't shattered. Instead, I had stood tall, even as the walls around me cracked. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I knew one thing with certainty. The old Bella was gone, and in her place was someone ready to fight for her own worth. Withdrawal doesn't happen all at once. It starts small, like shadows stretching longer at sunset. I began pulling away from them in ways they didn't notice at first. I stopped joining family dinners, claiming I had late work. I kept my door locked, my headphones in, my presence fading from their daily rhythm. For years, I had been the glue holding things together, quietly smoothing edges. Now, I let the cracks show, and they didn't like it. Bella, why don't you come eat with us? My mother asked one evening, knocking lightly. I'm not hungry, I lied, scrolling through my laptop. She lingered, as if wanting to say more, then walked away. My father tried another tactic. We're going to visit your aunt this weekend. You should come. I have deadlines, I answered, not looking up. The more they tried to pull me in, the further I retreated. At first, it felt like taking control, like reclaiming pieces of myself they had chipped away. But loneliness has sharp edges too. My phone buzzed constantly with client emails. Yet silence filled my nights. I caught myself staring at my empty desk, wishing I had someone to confide in. Darren, of course, noticed nothing, or maybe he did and didn't care. Still sulking? He teased when he passed my room. I ignored him, forcing my face into stone. Inside, though, the words cut. Sulking. As if my pain was a performance instead of the weight of years pressing down. I turned my energy elsewhere. Work became my refuge. Every project, every report, every meeting became a lifeline. If my family wouldn't see me, the world outside would. I stayed late at the office, taking on clients my coworkers avoided. My boss praised me for my dedication, but he didn't see the desperation beneath it. The more recognition I earned at work, the wider the gap at home grew. Sometimes, late at night, I heard my parents whispering in the kitchen. "She's changed," my mother murmured. "She doesn't smile anymore. She's making a point," my father said grimly. "She'll come around." But I didn't. Each passing week hardened my resolve. I thought maybe they would break first, that they would finally apologize. But apologies never came. Only silence and stolen glances. It was Darren who finally forced my hand. One evening, I came home to find my laptop gone. Panic surged through me. That laptop held every project, every document, my entire professional world. I stormed into the living room, where Darren lounged on the couch. "Where's my laptop?" I demanded. He shrugged. "I borrowed it." Mine crashed. Without asking, I snapped. "It's not a big deal." "It is to me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Everything I do, everything I've built, is on that laptop." He smirked. "You act like you're some CEO. Relax." The casual dismissal lit fire in my veins. "Give it back. Now." He rolled his eyes but stood reluctantly. When he handed it over, fingerprints smudged the screen. I clutched it to my chest, shaking with rage. "That's the last time," I said through clenched teeth. "You don't touch anything of mine again." "Or what?" he challenged. "Or you'll regret it," I whispered, surprising even myself. The threat hung in the air between us, sharp as glass. Darren snorted and walked away, but I saw the flicker of unease in his eyes. That night, I sat in bed staring at the glow of my laptop screen. Something inside me shifted. Withdrawal wasn't enough anymore. Silence wasn't protection. If I wanted freedom, I needed to plan. I opened a new document and began typing budgets, deadlines, apartment, listings in neighborhoods they wouldn't approve of, roadmap out of their control. As my fingers flew across the keys, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to their betrayal. I was building something of my own. The thought scared me, but it also thrilled me. Leaving wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about rebirth. Still, guilt tugged at me like an anchor. I thought of my mother's worried eyes, my father's stubborn silence, of birthdays missed, dinners skipped, laughter lost. Was I really ready to sever that bond? I closed my eyes and pictured my car. The freedom it had symbolized, the independence they had stolen, and my anger sharpened again. Yes, I was ready. The following weeks, I lived two lives. At home, I was the ghost, silent, detached, present in body but not in spirit. At work, I was unstoppable, confident, driven, on fire with ambition. The contrast grew starker with each passing day. I knew the explosion was coming. It was only a matter of when. One night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights blur against the darkness. I whispered to myself, "They think they broke me. They have no idea." The withdrawal phase was ending. The rise was about to begin. The shift began quietly. No fireworks, no dramatic announcement. Just me deciding I would no longer live small. At work, opportunities kept unfolding. I said yes to everything, even the projects others whispered were impossible. Late nights became my normal, but they didn't drain me anymore. They fueled me. Every client email answered, every contract signed, was proof that I was building a life beyond my family's shadow. My boss noticed. "You've got leadership potential." "Bella," he said, sliding a folder across my desk. Inside was an offer. Team lead for an upcoming campaign. It wasn't just a raise. It was recognition, validation that I was no longer just an employee, but someone shaping the future of the company, accepted without hesitation. For the first time, my paycheck reflected my worth. With it came power I had never tasted before. Not power over people, but over myself. At home, the tension thickened. Parents barely spoke to me. Darren muttered insults when we passed in the hallway, but it didn't matter. I had something they couldn't touch. I started visiting apartments in secret, modern, lofts with tall windows, quiet studios with balconies, overlooking the city. I took photos, saved floor plans, ran calculations late into the night. Every detail pulled me closer to freedom. Still, I kept my mask on at home. I didn't let them see the shift. Not yet. It was better this way. Better to build in silence until the foundation was unshakable. I thought often about the car, how they had sold it like it was theirs, not mine. That betrayal burned bright in my memory, but instead of letting it consume me, I let it fuel me. I promised myself the next car I bought would be better, bigger, faster, mine, in every sense of the word. One Friday evening, my boss asked me to join him and a few executives for dinner. The restaurant was high-end, the kind of place my family had always said was too much for people like us. I wore a sleek black dress, my hair styled, my confidence glowing. At the table, they spoke about expansion, about growth, about who they could trust. My name came up more than once. "She's sharp," one executive said. "She delivers," another agreed. I smiled, sipping my wine, realizing I belonged here. Not because anyone gave me permission, but because I had earned it. That night, walking back to my apartment, I passed a car dealership. A red sports car gleamed under the streetlights. I stopped, staring through the glass. For a moment, I pictured myself behind the wheel, not just driving, but flying, freedom in motion. It wasn't just about the car. It was about reclaiming what they had stolen. I promised myself. Soon. The rise wasn't only about money or status. It was about my voice. I started speaking up more in meetings, challenging ideas, offering solutions. Colleagues who once overlooked me now leaned in when I spoke. I wasn't invisible anymore. One night, after weeks of secrecy, I signed the lease on a one-bedroom apartment, downtown. The ink on the contract felt like a declaration of independence. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. The timing had to be perfect, but walking through that empty space, hearing my footsteps echo, I felt something I hadn't in years, peace. This was mine, every wall, every window, every inch, mine. I began moving little by little, boxes of clothes hidden in my car's trunk, books carried in a tote bag after work. Bit by bit, I shifted my life into that apartment. At home, no one noticed. They were too consumed with their own dramas. And maybe that was the greatest irony. They had ignored me for years, and now it made slipping away easier. At the office, the campaign I led soared. The client praised our work publicly, and my name was attached to the success. My boss called me into his office. "You've earned this," he said, handing me another promotion letter. This time, I didn't cry. I smiled, steady and sure, because I knew I deserved it. I began dressing differently, sharper, bolder. I bought myself small luxuries, a leather bag, new heels, dinners at places I once thought off limits. Each purchase was a reminder. I was no longer surviving. I was rising. One evening, as I carried another box into my apartment, my phone buzzed. It was Darren. "Where are you?" he asked, suspicion dripping from his tone. "Out," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "You've been acting weird," he pressed. "Good weird or bad weird?" I asked lightly. "Don't play games," he snapped. I hung up, leaning against the wall, laughter bubbling in my chest. For the first time, his words didn't sting. They meant nothing. I was no longer bound by his judgment. The rise wasn't about revenge yet. It was about preparation. About building a life so strong that when the time came, their downfall would be inevitable. Each night, I stood on my balcony, staring at the city lights. The air smelled like possibility, like freedom. And I whispered to myself, "They think I'm still under their roof, but I'm already gone." The rise was just beginning. The reckoning was on its way. The day arrived sooner than I expected. It started with a phone call from my landlord. "Bella, your parents are here," he said, confusion in his tone. I froze, box cutter still in my hand from unpacking. "What?" I asked. "They're outside demanding answers. Should I let them in?" My heart raced, but my voice was calm. "No, I'll come down." I slipped on my jacket, steadied my breath, and stepped into the elevator. The doors opened, revealing sunlight spilling into the lobby. And there they were. My parents. Darren. All three of them, waiting, faces twisted with indignation. "Bella," my father barked. "What is this? An apartment?" Darren sneered. "So this is where you've been hiding, playing big shot." I stood tall, key ring in hand, not flinching. "This," I said evenly, "is my home." My mother's lips trembled with outrage. "Your home? You live with us. You're part of this family." I shook my head. "No, I'm part of myself now." The lobby fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Other tenants passed by, casting curious glances. My family's drama had become a public performance. Darren stepped closer. "You think you're better than us now, don't you?" I met his glare without fear. "No, I just know I'm worth more than how you treated me." Gasps from bystanders whispered through the lobby. The truth was spilling out, and I wasn't holding back anymore. "You sold my car," I said, my voice rising. "You took what was mine, because you thought I was weak." Faces shifted around. Us. The security guard's eyes narrowed at Darren. My father puffed his chest. "We did what we had to do for the family." I cut him off. "No. You did what you had to do for Darren." Eyes turned to my brother. He tried to smirk, but the cracks showed. "Don't twist this," he snapped. "I'm not twisting anything," I said firmly. "For years, you ignored me, belittled me, and stripped away anything I earned." The words poured out. Unstoppable now. "But look around." I gestured at the lobby, the witnesses, the city outside. "I built this life without you." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's eyes glistened. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I interrupted. "I understand that family doesn't sell your car behind your back. Family doesn't call you worthless. Family doesn't shut you out just because you're not the golden child." Darren's fists clenched, but I didn't step back. "You know what's funny?" I continued, my voice steady. "You thought selling my car would break me, but it did the opposite. It set me free." Murmurs rippled through the lobby. Tenants leaned in, whispering. This was my stage now, and I owned it. "I've been working, saving, building," I said. "And soon I'll have more than you ever imagined." Darren scoffed. "You? Please. You're nothing without us." A sharp laugh escaped my throat. "Without you, Darren, I became everything." The words hit him harder than any slap could. My father's face turned red. "You'll regret talking to us like this." "No," I replied calmly. "You'll regret underestimating me." The guard stepped closer, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay here?" he asked. I turned to him, smiling. "Everything's perfect." But my parents looked anything but perfect. They looked small, exposed. For once, the power wasn't theirs, it was mine. I pulled out my new car key from my pocket. Sleek, metallic, shining under the lobby lights. Gasps echoed again. "You bought a car?" Darren asked, disbelief breaking his mask. "Not just any car," I said. "A better one than the one you stole." I held the key high, letting the symbol of my triumph gleam. The bystanders whispered louder. Now, she bought her own car. She stood up to them. I could feel the tide turning. Darren's smirk vanished. My father's voice faltered. "You think this makes you strong?" "No," I said quietly. "This proves I already was." The words echoed through the marble lobby, and for the first time in my life, they had no response. They stood there, mouths opening, closing, but nothing came out. I pressed the button for the elevator, the doors sliding open smoothly. Before stepping in, I turned back one last time. "This is just the beginning," I said. "Next time you see me, you'll realize you lost more than a daughter." I stepped inside. The doors closed on their stunned faces, and in that moment, I knew the reckoning had begun. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't weak. I was rising, and they were about to fall. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages flooding in like an unstoppable tide. All from my parents, all from Darren. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I sipped my coffee on the balcony of my apartment. The sun was warm, the city buzzing below, a life I had carved for myself, but peace was short-lived. By noon, the messages turned ugly. "You've embarrassed this family," my father's voice thundered in one voicemail. "You've ruined us," my mother cried in another. And Darren, always the loudest, spat venom through text. "You'll regret humiliating me in front of everyone." I laughed, bitterly. He still didn't get it. The humiliation wasn't mine. It was his. Word had spread fast through the building. Neighbors greeted me differently. Now smiles, nods, even quiet admiration. "You stood up to them," one whispered in the elevator. "Good for you." For once, people saw me not as the quiet daughter in the shadow of her brother, but as someone strong, someone who fought back. Still, tension lingered in the air. My parents weren't the type to surrender gracefully. They had built their image on control, and I had shattered it in a single confrontation. By evening, the fallout spread further. An aunt texted me. "What happened with your parents?" "They said you attacked them," I sighed. Typing back slowly. "No, I defended myself." The truth was messy. Family drama always was. But I refused to let their lies rewrite my story again. Not this time. I opened my laptop, staring at my finances. Every dollar I had saved, every hour I had worked, was staring back at me. It wasn't millions, but it was mine. I thought about Darren, how he had always sneered at my independence. "You'll never make it without us," he had once told me. But here I was, still standing, still rising. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I froze. Heart pounding, peeking through the peephole. I saw them, my parents, Darren, again clutching bags, their faces tight with desperation. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called through the wood. "What do you want?" Silence. Then my mother's trembling voice. "We need your help." The words felt surreal. They had never admitted weakness before. I hesitated, hand hovering over the lock. "Help?" I asked. "With what?" Darren's voice cut in, sharp and angry. "They're threatening to repossess the house. Dad's job is on the line. We need money." My stomach twisted. Money. It always came back to money. I pressed my forehead to the door, closing my eyes. "All those years," I whispered. "You ignored me. You stole from me. You called me worthless. And now you want my help?" My father's booming voice softened for the first time. "We didn't know what we were doing. Bella, a lie. They knew. They just didn't care." I opened the door halfway, enough to see their faces. tired, worn, cracked masks of superiority. Darren looked the worst of all. His arrogance had melted into fear. "Please," my mother whispered. Her eyes darted around the hall, terrified of the neighbors watching, the mighty family begging at my doorstep. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'll think about it," I said coldly. I shut the door before they could respond. Leaning against it, I let out a long breath. For years, I had been the one begging for scraps of love, attention, acknowledgement. Now the roles were reversed. The fallout was complete. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying every word, every look. Part of me wanted revenge, sharp and merciless. Another part wanted justice, balanced and fair. But most of all, I wanted peace. And peace didn't come from giving in. It came from standing firm. The next morning, I drafted a letter, clear, simple, final. Told them I would not give them money. I told them I would not sacrifice my future to fix mistakes they had made, but I offered something else. Therapy, a chance to rebuild, to face the truth, to actually be a family. I left the letter taped to their front door. Hours later, I got a message from Darren. "You're pathetic. Enjoy your fake little life." I smiled faintly. His anger only proved I was winning. The power had shifted. The control was mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. The fallout wasn't just theirs. It was mine too. A shedding of old chains, a release of old wounds. I walked to my new car, sunlight glinting off the hood. Sliding into the seat, I started the engine. The roar was freedom itself. Driving through the city, I felt lighter, stronger, untouchable. Because no matter what came next, one truth had been carved into stone. I wasn't their victim. Anymore, I was my own person, and the fallout had made that clear to everyone, especially me. The letter I left on their door changed everything. By morning, whispers spread through the neighborhood. People talked, they always did. But this time, the story wasn't about my failures. It was about theirs. They begged her for money, one neighbor whispered in the grocery store. She turned them down, another said with awe. I walked down the aisle, head high, for once unafraid of their stares. Every step felt like justice. But reckoning wasn't just about pride. It was about truth. And the truth had been buried for too long. That afternoon, I received a message from Lily, my younger cousin. She had always believed the lies Darren told about me. But now she wrote, "Is it true? Did they really take your savings for his car?" My chest tightened. Finally, someone was asking the right question. "Yes," I typed back. "They did, and they never once apologized." Minutes later, she replied, "I believe you. I'm sorry I didn't before." Her words were small, but they cracked the wall of isolation I had carried for years. The reckoning was spreading, like fire in dry grass. Later that evening, I was invited to a family gathering, not by my parents, not by Darren, but by my aunt. "People need to hear your side," she said. My heart pounded as I stood at her doorstep. Inside, relatives who had avoided me for years sat waiting. Eyes curious, eyes doubtful, eyes ready for truth. I took a deep breath and began. "They stole from me when I was 19, I said. My parents sold my car behind my back and gave the money to Darren. Gasps filled the room. Faces turned to my mother. She shifted uncomfortably, her hands twisting in her lap. "We did what we thought was best," she muttered. "What was best for who?" I shot back. "For me, it was betrayal. For Darren, it was privilege." Silence settled heavy. I went on. "For years, I was told I didn't matter, that my sacrifices were normal, that his needs came before mine." I looked around the room. "Tell me, Does that sound like family to you? My father's jaw clenched. You don't understand the pressure we were under, he barked. I understand perfectly, I said coldly. You chose him. Every single time. Darren stood, his voice rising. You're just jealous. Always have been. I earned everything I got. Earned? I laughed bitterly. You earned a car bought with my savings? You earned their loyalty while I worked myself sick to survive? The room crackled with tension. My aunt spoke up softly. She has a point, Darren. For the first time, the tide turned. The reckoning wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had watched silently, pretending not to notice. My mother's face paled. You don't know what it was like, she whispered. We were afraid of losing him. He was fragile. And I wasn't, I demanded. I cried myself to sleep for years, wondering why I wasn't enough. Tears pricked my eyes, but my voice stayed firm. You broke me, but I built myself back up. Without you, Darren scoffed. You think you're better than us now just because you have money? I stepped closer, staring him down. No, I think I'm free. That's the difference. The room was silent, every ear tuned to the storm between us. Finally, my father spoke. You embarrassed us, Bella, publicly. I met his eyes. And you humiliated me privately for years. Which one do you think lasts longer? No answer came. Just silence. Thick, uncomfortable, truth-filled. Then something unexpected happened. Lily stood up. I believe her, she said clearly. She's telling the truth, and I think we all knew it deep down. One by one, others nodded. The reckoning had landed. Not just for my parents, not just for Darren, but for everyone who had looked away, for everyone who had let me carry the weight alone. I left that night. Lighter? Not because they apologized. They hadn't, not because they changed. They wouldn't, but because the truth was finally spoken. Aloud, and truth has power. The next morning, Darren cornered me outside my apartment, his face twisted with anger. You think you won, he snarled. I didn't have to win, I replied calmly. You exposed yourself. His fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he might lash out. But then something flickered in his eyes. Fear. Realized the shift. I wasn't the weak sister anymore. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was the reckoning, and nothing terrified him more. I walked past him without another word. The sun rose warm on my face, and I knew the end was near. One chapter of pain closing, another of freedom opening. The reckoning left echoes. Whispers still circled in the neighborhood. But for the first time, those whispers weren't chains around my neck. They were truth traveling without my effort. A weight I no longer had to carry alone. I sat in my apartment the morning after, sipping coffee by the window. Sunlight spilled across my table. Warm, golden, alive. And I realized something. This was the first morning, in years that I didn't wake up heavy with dread. No secret betrayal pressed against my chest, no invisible war raging in silence. The truth was out, and whether they liked it or not, it would stay there. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. We need to talk. Just 3 words. For years, those words had been weapons. Today they felt hollow. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence was the loudest voice I could give. Later, I walked along the river trail. The breeze tangled through my hair, the water glinting like scattered diamonds. Children laughed in the distance. Couples strolled hand in hand, and I walked alone, but not lonely. For the first time, solitude felt like strength. Every step reminded me that I was here, still standing, still breathing, not broken, not erased, alive. At the cafe near the bridge, I ran into Lily again. She smiled shyly, as if unsure if she was welcome. Can I sit? She asked. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around her mug. I'm sorry for believing their lies, she said quietly. I studied her face, the sincerity in her eyes. You were young, I said. And sometimes it's easier to believe the louder voices, she nodded, relief softening her features. I want to know you, she added. Not their version of you, the real you. Something inside me melted. For years, I had begged for recognition. And now, it was finally here. Not from the people who hurt me, but from someone willing to listen, and that mattered more than I realized. We talked for hours. About books, about dreams, about the future. By the time the sun dipped low and the lamps along the bridge flickered on, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Later that night, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice came through, low and weary. You've made your point, Bella. But family is family. We can't undo the past. Don't turn your back forever. I listened once, then deleted it. Family isn't an excuse. Family isn't immunity. Family is supposed to be love, and love isn't betrayal. Love isn't stealing. Love isn't silence. I closed my phone and stared out at the skyline. For so long, I had measured myself by their acceptance. But I didn't need that anymore. I didn't need them to validate me. I was already whole. The next weekend, I drove past their house, the same shutters, the same cracked driveway, but everything looked smaller, not because it had changed, because I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Some doors are better left, closed. Instead, I kept driving further down the road, into the city lights where possibility waited. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the mirror, clear eyes, a steady jaw. No trace of the girl who cried herself to sleep after losing everything she had saved. She was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who had built herself from betrayals, ashes, someone who had survived and thrived. That night, I opened my journal. The pages were filled with anger from years past. But tonight, I wrote something different. I am enough. 3 words. Simple, true, unshakable. And for once, I believed them. I leaned back, tears softening my vision. But they weren't tears of pain. They were release. Healing doesn't arrive in a thunderclap. It comes slowly, in breaths, in choices, in boundaries honored. It comes in the decision to walk away, even when staying feels easier. It comes in silence that speaks louder than screams. And it had come for me. As I closed the journal, I knew this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Chapter where I wasn't the forgotten daughter, or the betrayed sister, or the discarded child. I was me, free, alive, whole, and finally unafraid. Before I end, I'll leave you with this. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because sometimes, the hardest truth to learn is also the simplest one. You are already enough,